Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Today's guest is Jeremy Meltzer, founder and CEO of I=Change, Australia's fastest growing impact marketing platform. Jeremy has built partnerships with over 400 brands, from Camilla and Clarins to law firms and hospitality businesses, raising more than $12 million for NGOs $1 at a time and impacting the lives of more than 2 million people globally. I=Change is a certified B Corp, an award-winning innovator, and at its heart is driven by Jeremy's passion for empowering women and girls and creating a more sustainable world. In our conversation, Jeremy shares the deeply personal journey that led him to this work, beginning with his experiences in Cuba that opened his eyes to the prevalence of gender-based violence. We talk about how those experiences sparked a vision to engage business as a powerful driver of social change. And Jeremy reflects on the lessons of COVID, on why businesses must move beyond profit-first thinking, and on the opportunities for authentic partnerships between brands and NGOs to create measurable impact. You'll hear stories of persistence, innovation, and the belief that when we combine business, love, and human values, we can create systems of change that benefit both companies and communities. This is a conversation about what business can and must become when it embraces purpose as a force for good. Jeremy, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Caroline, my pleasure. Great to be here. Thank you.
So, first question for every guest is the same. Is there a role for love in business, do you think?
It's an important question, that, because for far too long we've separated our humanity from the role of business, and we've normalized a system and structure which has obviously prefaced profit at any cost. And to the extent that we kind of do leave our humanity at home and our values and what we care about in the world. And it's sort of a version of insanity when you think about it. It's like what we do each day for this thing called money, which we created, and what we're required to do in order to receive it. So is there a role for love in business? Yes, there's a role for compassion. There's a role for empathy. There's a role for a deep correlation of our values and what we care about in the world and what business stands for. And while business, if business is a Titanic, we're slowly moving it in that direction. But I think we'd all agree that given the state of the world, we need to move it a lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you say it's like madness, and it is absolutely like madness when you sit down and take time to think about it. And when you share a picture of what business can look like, what some businesses look like. I know you're a speaker as well, Jeremy, and I've got no doubt people get excited by that, don't they?
I think, yeah, if we were to look at it through the lens of human nature, it's like mostly we bumble along with a set of structures and ideas that have been largely given to us from the moment of birth, and it's a product of our unique and individual conditioning. And then that's the irony, what excites us as human beings is the potential for what we could become, is looking over the horizon to be part of something and building something bigger than ourselves. And so, yes, it excites people because it is, in its nature, visionary. And yet most of us are relatively content kind of bumbling along doing what we do without actually realizing the larger implications of it, which is sort of where I believe we must head, is to give people a visceral understanding and experience of the true costs of our choices. Now, COVID is an interesting example because what business said they would never do, they literally did from one day to the next, because they were directly impacted by by COVID and by what it meant for their businesses and their workforces. So, we are enormously adaptive as human beings. We're herd creatures. We tend to follow each other. We're highly able to be influenced. And I think as a kind of sort of an understanding that we can use that to our favor, but yet there's a lot of inertia for business as usual.
Mm. And wasn't COVID such a sliding doors, opportunity for a moment, which didn't quite come through? What struck me was how quickly and instinctively so many businesses tried to figure out how they could help in the crisis, right? And showed up in some marvelous ways. And yet that opportunity to actually make deeper change over the long term escaped us.
Yeah, the malls, it's like it's almost like we wanted to rebound to what was, to reground ourselves in our normal. So the shopping centres filled up as quickly as they could. And we went back to what we knew because we kind of yearned for what we knew because that's what we knew.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a bit like, I remember I was in New York not long after 9/11, and there were some beautiful stories of how neighbours opened doors and they reached out and they cooked for each other and people met on the street, and a sense of community was built and a sense of we are in this together. What we do now matters. We must help each other. But then of course, once it was largely over, once COVID was largely over, we went back to what we knew. And the thing is, what we know is actually not what makes us deeply joyful. What we know is not net generative for people and planet. What we know is leading to enormous mental health crisis. I mean, we're already at that point in this country. What we know is not so slowly destroying the planet. So why do we know what we know? Why do we do what we do? Why is that normalized? These are big questions, but also not so difficult to answer.
Yeah. But what we also know is that business can change and it can adapt far better than we assumed it could in the past. I think I could continue this philosophical discussion with you. We're very aligned. But I want to introduce our listeners to your world and I Equal Change. Now, you've built I Equal Change into Australia's fastest growing impact marketing platform. Before we dive into your business and the mechanics of the model, can you share with us the personal journey that led you to found the business? Was there a defining moment? What sparked this move?
It's a beautiful question to start. I often ask that question myself of people because I think it's important for all of us to be grounded in those moments that deeply move us, in that moments that connect us with the bigger possibility of how we can use our privilege to create change, our networks, our education. I mean, I'm as aware as I believe I can be as sort of a white, educated, tall, English-speaking male of the privilege that brings me, and therefore the responsibility. For me, I went to Havana in Cuba at a time when no one went to Havana, Cuba. I didn't see another tourist for the 4 months I was there. This was literally like 1999. And I had a Cuban girlfriend and I met a big part of the community. I was living in the old, poor part of Havana called Havana Vieja, Old Havana. And very quickly, within days of arriving, I heard from her girlfriends and her herself stories of abuse from men, their partners, ex-partners, boyfriends, husbands, exes, whoever. And I was not only shocked by that, but I was shocked and disturbed by how they thought that was normal, that's just what men do. And I remember thinking, well, actually, no, that's not what men do, not where I come from. What's going on here? Why do women in this community think that all men are violent at some point in their lives or will display some version of violence or abuse, even to the point that they thought that's an expression of love, like being jealousy and beating someone up was an expression of their love.
Wow.
Whereas in Australia, it was and is a crime. Now, I had no idea how prevalent that issue was, of course, in Australia as well, and globally. So that set me off on a journey, a very challenging journey of trying to work out what the hell's going on. Why is this one of the ancient issues of our time? And it doesn't seem to be getting better. Why is one in three women physically or sexually abused in their lifetimes, mostly by men they know? Now, a lot of limelight, importantly, has been shone on this issue in the last dozen years, especially, the advent of Me Too was a pivotal moment. There's a lot more reporting. We're far more complex in our thinking about this. The terms toxic masculinity and, whether that be helpful or not. All of these conversations shine a light onto this issue, which still impacts so many women in Australia and globally. And so I started meeting with NGOs around the world. I lived in Miami for a few years after that. And again, almost every woman I met had a story. And almost every Australian woman that we know either has a story or knows someone who has a story.
Yeah.
And I know most women, whether friends or girlfriends in the past, have had a story. And so I thought, shit, what's happening here? Like why don't we all know about this? Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we as men roaring about this? We go to the football and make a lot of noise about men kicking a rubber ball around or leather ball, and we get very passionate. But what about our passion and our commitment to standing up for what's happening to our sisters, our daughters, our mothers? Where's that passion? And how are we so ridiculously tribal that we'll scream, rant and rave at a football game, but not about this issue that's affecting 1 in 3 women in our community? So that was sort of the genesis of it. I started then meeting NGOs and realizing that this was sort of the early stages they had the data that you must empower women and girls. You must protect women and girls. You must unlock their potentials. And that, especially in the developing world, has an outsized impact on the entire community. So I was hearing this from the NGOs, and all the data it was relatively early days, but the data was coming in. This is in the early 2000s, about how critical it was to invest in the girl child, invest in women, invest in girls' education, enable women to start businesses. And yet we weren't having this conversation out in the broader community. And the other thing, of course, which is kind of the genesis of the idea for the business, was they all needed more money to do their work. And I learned that in the developing world, where I have spent a lot of time now, funds can go 5 times further in terms of the social return on investment, SROI. So, yeah, that was the sort of long-winded answer, I'm afraid. But the heart of the reason why was those early experiences in Latin America.
Thank you, and that wasn't a long-winded answer at all. In fact, I'm going to push you a little bit on that, because I'm curious, how could you not walk past that? There would be other people who might experience similar, have a similar experience and learn about this and understand that this is how things were in Cuba and later Miami. But how was it that it became something that you did something about it? You couldn't, it's who was it? I can't remember his name, the former head of the Australian Defence Force, who said, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Most people see terrible things and don't like what they see, recognize the unfair, the inequity, the wrongness of those things, but most people don't do anything about it. And I just love to know, do you understand why you did something about it? That you wanted to understand more?
I was always a sensitive boy, very sensitive growing up, deeply moved by injustice. I think we used to go to Fiji a lot as a family and spend a lot of time in the villages. And I saw poverty, material poverty, very young, and was moved by it. And yet also was exposed to a very joyful people. And I started to, before I had the language for it, I thought, it's so interesting that these communities have very little, but seem to laugh more than I've heard anyone laugh. I mean, coconut falls on someone's foot and the village lasts for a week. I mean, it's literally, I'm like, people don't seem to be that happy in Australia, comparatively, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on here? I think there was a deep curiosity, but ultimately it was a deep sensitivity and when I heard these stories, it was a profound sense of injustice. And I think that's what's marked my life is a very clear sense of what's right and wrong, and a clear sense of my privilege, growing up with a loving family and private school education and Australian and all the rest. And almost then a sense of, well, who am I not to do something? Like, what am I going to do otherwise? Like, really, I don't need, like, I think I saw through the ridiculousness of having lots of stuff and identifying myself with the trappings that I see a lot of people still kind of bumbling their way through, as if, a better car is going to fill you up for any more than 5 minutes. Like, the insanity of our accumulation of stuff and our identification with it is a big part of the issue. And that, again, is a symbolic of our conditioning, and again, symbolic of the sort of perverse incentives of business. So somehow I intuitively knew that. I don't know why. I think I've been accused of being an old soul before. Maybe there's something there. But I had that awareness as a literally young boy of the ridiculousness of it all. And I had these moments where I'd come back from literally a village in the developing world, and then I'd come back to the next day. I'm in, highly privileged private school, going to school with some of the kids of the wealthiest families in the country. And it's still now like I'll be in the developing world setting, or there's been times I've been in a refugee camp and been amongst enormous trauma. And then a week later, I'm at some ridiculous awards night for businesses, for retailers, where everyone's just like dressed up. And I'm sounding perhaps more judgmental than I actually am, because I realize we're all doing the best with what we know. But I can sort of see how we're all just kind of clever monkeys doing the best with our in our state of consciousness, highly influenced by what others are doing. And so it's interesting because there's the kind of the day-to-day that we bumble along, and we by participating in it, we maintain it. And that's what it requires, all of us to keep participating. And yet I think there's a quiet revolutionary in all of us. Because that's actually innate to the human spirit. Like, who do we want to be in this world? What do we want to change? What do we want to influence? Like, it's part of that hero's journey, that archetypal journey, which is why movies like Star Wars are so incredibly successful, because they highlight the potential that lies at least latently in all of us to make a difference. Now, why some people do and others don't, I guess these are personal equations as to how compelled people feel to be. And sometimes I meet people and they seem deeply happy, kind of doing what they do, and they've got a job and wife and family, and that's beautiful, right? And they love to catch up with their friends and a few drinks. I mean, I make no judgment. I almost admire people who can just be happy, quote unquote, doing that. But that was never my path. And so here we are.
Isn't that interesting? And it's, it's to follow the money trail. It's the societal norm to follow the path, follow the money trail, compare yourself to the next person up there. So once you achieve what you set yourself out to achieve, for 5 minutes you're happy, and then you set your sights up on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And meantime, we're distracted by, it's interesting you raise movies like Star Wars and the hero's journey, because, we're seeing a lot of reality shows, which is quite the opposite to the hero's journey. It's looking at, humanity in some of its more crass forms, and it's a distraction. So I think you're right. I think there is there are activists in all of us. It's triggering the awareness that you do have the power to create change, and that small change can create a ripple effect of large change. And I think when people recognize that, that's when they start thinking about what else they can do.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And to your point, it is the hungry ghost, right? Like you obtain one thing and then like, what's next, right? Because nothing fills the hole.
Mm.
We're living in times where with increased polarization and tribalism, and what seems to be increasingly very satisfying is othering.
Mm.
Now, that is, again, innate to human nature. We like to find a scapegoat for the tragic human impulse that it's far easier to blame someone else than it is to look in the mirror. But, people running businesses or CEOs earning millions, they're just human beings. Everyone's doing the best with what they have, right?
Yep.
Some people had access to more privilege, some people to less, some people to more networks, some to less. But ultimately, we are just a group of clever mammals doing the best with our time on this planet. And so it's far more complicated and challenging to see it through that lens than it is to blame the CEO or blame business or blame politicians. It's so childlike, right? It really is completely infantile, but it's satisfying. It's like, let's just blame, or blame the Jews or blame black. It's like, if we were to stop for a minute and just try to have some understanding and do the hard work of understanding where people come from and their cultural, religious, their histories and how it shaped their worldviews, that's the hard work that very few of us seem prepared to do, because it's emotionally very satisfying to have a big opinion and a big emotional experience about what we believe in, which hardens our beliefs even further. And I think that's the danger of this moment, is the polarization and, of course, the rabbit holes that people are going down, in their social media feeds, rather than just reaching across the aisle and talking to people. So to bring that back to business, I think that's where we need to remain alert, because people running businesses, most people are good people. And, I speak to businesses literally every day, and, they want to do good. They care about things. It's just a group of people, right, operating within certain structures. So, we built iEqual Change to be very pragmatic, to help them meet their growth goals and their targets in a way that could also make it simple for them to give back and create change. And I think that's sort of the point about, being in the Titanic and slowly turning the ship rather than trying to stop the ship.
Yes.
Is more pragmatic at a time like this.
Yes. So let's talk about iEqual Change. And for listeners who may not be familiar with it, can you explain how it actually works?
Very simply, and we knew that would be important. So I'll go back one step. Dad and I started an olive oil business. We have a farm in Victoria, and so we were the first Australian olive oil in the US, and I was going back and forth for years selling it into America. And I'd never forgotten the NGOs, and even in the States, my brother was in Washington. I'd go and stay with him, and I'd meet with NGOs, and a lot of these NGOs are based out of either Washington or New York. And that's when I was hearing a lot also about women and girls. So I had one of those 3 a.m. ideas, which I imagine many of us can relate to. Sometimes you should just go back to sleep and forget about it and, test it in the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
I tested this one when the sun came up, and it still seemed to be an idea worth pursuing. And it was a simple one, because I had been going into stores and seeing, as we still see, right, occasional, do you want to round up and give an extra $1 or whatever?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, hold on, that's kind of insulting to me as the consumer, because I've just bought something from you. You've made money from me, and now you're asking me to make a donation. You make the bloody donation, right? Like, where's your skin in the game? You just made a profit from my purchase from you. Don't ask me to make a donation, right? Like,
Yep.
how does that engender loyalty? Like, it's just ridiculous. So I thought, let's flip the model. The brand gives back, and the customer can choose where it goes. So I thought, what if we gave $1 from every bottle of olive oil that we sell online? And we build a little platform where we have several NGO projects, and our customer can choose where it goes. Now, a very simple idea, and it hadn't been done. And
This was 2016?
This is even earlier because it took us a long time to work out how to do it and build it. And I made many mistakes along the way. This is probably 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Yep. So we started testing this with our little olive oil family business, and we saw a surprising uptick in customers engaging and talking about it across social media and buying it, becoming loyal to our little brand. So I thought, okay, well, that's great. And then we send out those donations to the charitable partners and thought, okay, well, what if we could make this a third-party platform for other businesses to make it simple for them to give back? And so that's what we did. That's what I've been literally doing for the last 10 years. What I also knew was important was the transparency, that there's still a lot of, which is something we're continually kind of addressing, is the lack of understanding of the whole. And I don't even like to use the word charity because I don't see it as charity. I mean, this is, I firmly believe we must start to see NGOs as equal partners for development that must be well resourced at this time in order to address the critical issues that we care about. And we need to stop seeing them as these cute charities to give a few dollars to when we can, but as critical organizations that need support now more than ever, especially with the pullback of USAID funding, et cetera, and that of other governments.
That's been devastating, hasn't it?
Devastating, and I've seen it on the ground. I was just in New York meeting with partners and speaking with partners in Asia Pacific. Hundreds of thousands of people are already dying as a result of that decision by two men who have no idea what they're talking about, right, and no idea of the implications and actually don't care. So, yeah, there's a whole series of tools, but a main one is the business can show in real time how much they're raising and where it's going, and use that as a feature to engage customers and their internal teams as well.
And the point you make about, how we view these organizations just as charities who you donate to every now and again, and what they can do when they're empowered. I remember when I first started going down the path I'm on now, it started, because my background is marketing, it started in the cause marketing world. And I went to a conference which is still going in America today called Engage for Good. And I saw a case study. It was presented by the head of brand, I think it was. It was for Pampers nappies, and it was a partnership with UNICEF. And it was 1 pack equals 1 vaccine. And it was a vaccination for maternal and neonatal tetanus. And what I found extraordinary about that partnership is it had been going for years. It was a strategic partnership. It had started off as a little, Christmas promotion, and it had expanded to be an entire program. And over a period of over 10 years, they ended up with a goal to eradicate MNT, maternal and neonatal tetanus, from the world. And they didn't quite get there. I don't think it was actually possible to do it, but the last I heard, they eradicated it from 8 different countries, and that was the power of a strategic partnership between a corporate brand and a non-profit organization. And for me, that just completely changed my worldview of, what marketing was capable of and what business could be capable of, and brands.
Enjoying the podcast? If you're looking for more inspiration, head to our website, thecauseeffect.com.au, for more resources on how you can start using your business as a force for good. Or buy the For Love and Money book. Every copy sold allows us to protect 1 square metre of rainforest.
Yeah, it's a great example. I'm shocked at how few brands still think strategically about this. Like, you've got, standout brands like Patagonia, right? Who, they've deeply built this into the DNA of the brand and the customer experience. And I know the managing director in Australia, and then the business attributes overall about 30% of their revenues to what most businesses can still consider just a cost. Right? So there's an enormous growth opportunity, revenue opportunity, like if we're going to talk the language of business. And yet still it's largely perceived as just, okay, that's a nice thing we'll get to rather than making it a priority, where you've got all these consumers. Like there's only so much you can compete with product and promotion. Unless you have that purpose piece, unless you're committed, it's authentic, and you're on that journey, how can you, like, once someone else has a similar pair of shoes at a similar price, I mean, how are you going to differentiate with influencers and the same kind of nonsense, which is just sort of, increase costs more and more, social ads. Like there's a point at which you start to come up against the hard limits of seducing people to buy stuff they actually don't need. And yeah, I'm just sort of, I think we're slowly getting there, but it surprises me how there's still a lack of businesses compared to really make that leap, even though we're getting there. We haven't reached that tipping point yet.
Yeah. I agree. I keep thinking, it's going to happen. You can see it happening. And then somehow it sort of falls back into business as usual. I'd want to get back into that subject about, what consumers want and that idea of profit and purpose being binary. But before we do, I just want to touch on something, because I've read you've raised over $12 million now, or I Equal Change has raised about $12.5 million for NGOs impacting 2 million people. Yet, you had no tech background when you started. How did you launch an online platform and achieve what you've achieved without any tech background?
Stubbornness.
Purpose.
Look, I've tried a few things in my life, shall we say, and I think many of your listeners and most of us have had the experience where the universe wants it to happen. Our job is just to keep stepping through those doors, putting in the hours, watching, remaining flexible, alert, and seeing the kind of breadcrumbs that's being left for us as a path to keep following. So I knew this was about something much bigger than me, of course. I felt that I could kind of just be of service to it. And I knew I had no tech. And I didn't really want to understand tech necessarily. That wasn't my skill set, and it still isn't. But, we had no money, right, to kind of hire people, and it was just an idea. So it's definitely been a long journey to making all sorts of mistakes, offshoring to different countries and getting it wrong and having to rebuild it, and kind of finally now having an in-house team who are great. And I feel very privileged and fortunate to have, in our corner. But yeah, it was about finding the people. And this tech is this extraordinary new world that's also emerged in the last 20, 30 years, right? Like these things weren't even possible to build. Even 10 years ago, like what we built our prototype on, you wouldn't even think of building it on now, right? So it's a fast moving space, but I just kind of knew that if we kept going, those people would emerge, and we would just need to keep testing it and proving it out with some initial businesses, which is what we did. And ultimately we would start to get scale. So that's sort of where we're heading now.
Did you imagine you would reach the kind of figures you now have, or was your ambition pitching you beyond that?
I think I'm also victim to, when's enough? Like people have said to me, look, if you want to do something else with your life, you could perhaps go to your grave knowing that you've had some impact. I said, we haven't even started. What are you talking about? Right? Like, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Like, and I remember when the counter on our site showed $1, we raised that first $1. So I think, look, there's only a few hundred businesses. And when I say only, like that's still great, but there's there's about 80,000 online businesses in this country, right? And we've got a few hundred. So the opportunity to be raising millions of dollars a month rather than a year is very, very real.
Yeah.
So, and especially now, given what's happened, with foreign aid, and, we remain passionate about the developing world. Like about half of our projects are working in Australia, food security and mental health, violence, and protecting children and all the issues that we care about. but funds can go 5 times further in the developing world. And I think a small, I mean, I was up in Papua New Guinea about a year ago with UN Women, and just to see how the amounts of violence against women, which is just, it's an epicenter up there. There's also, just give a snapshot of some of the NGOs we support, both small and large.
Yeah, please do.
We support UN agencies and some of the brands people would recognize, like Plan and Care and others. And yet I get excited by, guys like Dr. Barry. Now, Dr. Barry was a carpenter, and his grandfather was up in PNG during the Second World War, and said, listen, you got to get up there. It's an incredible country. And so he did. And he saw how many women were dying in childbirth. Mm. So imagine this guy comes back to Brisbane in his 40s. He retrains as an obstetrician, right? Takes him 8 years. He's been living back in Papua New Guinea ever since. He flies around on his little seaplane with his doctor's bag out to remote parts of PNG to ensure women survive childbirth.
Wow.
And he's invented this thing called a baby bundle. It's a $28 intervention, which is a little plastic bath to wash your baby. And in that, they put nappies, baby wipes, something to swaddle the baby, but also a few dollars, it's about $8 to $9 of that $28 is cash to help a woman get to a clinic.
Right.
Because one of the great causes of maternal health is that a woman will give birth in her home, in her hut. Mm. And the slightest complication can take her life. Mm. But if she can just get to a clinic where there's a trained midwife at least, then she has a much greater chance, over 70% chance of surviving even a slight complication in birth. So where they've given out these $28 baby bundles, they call them, they've reduced infant mortality by up to 78%.
Yeah, wow.
Right? So $28, let's call it $30, what we'd spend having a couple of us having a sandwich and a coffee for lunch can save a woman and a child's life.
Yeah.
Amongst our nearest neighbour in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, incredible. So you mentioned you've got a few hundred brands on board, and I was looking at your website. So you've got a lot of fashion brands, cosmetic brands. I think now you're moving into law firms and hospitality, so you're expanding. What do you think, Jeremy, drives these businesses to come on board? Is it, recognizing the customer demand? Is it leadership vision? Or is it something else? Or is it different for each person? Is there any sort of consistent thing that gets them over the line to say yes?
Yeah, it's a good question. It varies, and that's why we speak about what we do both to head and heart. It depends on the structure of the business. Like if it's founder-led and he or she just cares deeply about an issue, they can just say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to build this into the price, give $1. It doesn't have to be $1. Brands can give a percentage of the basket. They can scale it up and down. They can set a cap for the month. Like we've made it really flexible. So it's not like you've got to commit to giving back from every sale ongoing. You don't.
Yeah. And by the way, that full $1 goes to
the NGO, 100%.
Doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah. And then the larger businesses, it takes longer, right? There's more stakeholders, there's boards, they need to build it in as part of their strategy. But I think overall, there is a growing sense of we must do something as a business to be relevant.
Yeah.
And I see a day coming soon where product and promotion is simply not enough. Like we have to bring in the third pillar of purpose in order to be relevant. And so we've been very pragmatic insofar as getting case studies of businesses to talk about how does this impact those marketing metrics, which they're measuring against all their investments and marketing campaigns. So uplift in customer engagement, average order values, conversions, repeat purchase rates, loyalty, open rates, all these metrics that digital marketers are looking to improve, we now speak to. And we can show that it is driving those metrics. I mean, we've had on our site, there's some amazing video testimonials from brands like JBL and Nutri Organics and others just talking about how, in some cases, their $1 that they've given has driven up to $18 in incremental revenue, right? Now, that's an enormous return for what most businesses still consider a cost.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge is the word donation. And we speak to that now. Look, that's the outcome is yes, you are giving money, but actually up front, here's the marketing return that you could expect to see. And again, it's just kind of a pragmatic repositioning of what we do in order to speak their language. But I think that's very important because it's my heart breaks every time we excite the whole marketing team and then the CFO says, we're not doing it. We're not making a donation because he or she just sees that as a cost.
Yeah.
They weren't on the calls. They don't understand. They don't want to understand. They're just like, no, we can't afford it. But I'm like, well, hold on. You're spending how much on your social ads anyway, which often don't move the needle? Like why is that okay when you could be donating? And as a CEO of a big business here said to his team when I presented, he said, look, why don't we try this? Because if it doesn't drive growth, at least we've given money away and we've done good in the world. If it does, it is a win-win. But we're not just giving money to Facebook into a black hole and hoping it, drives customers, which of course it does, and you can measure it and all the rest. But at least in this case, and in their case, it did work, right? It drove both engagement and additional sales and an uplift in email open rates and all the things that they wanted to see and then, the other component as well is workplace culture, like attracting and retaining talent.
More so than ever before.
I mean, you know so much about this. There's a war for talent, right? And we were working with Pandora Jewelry a few years ago, and they said they were really surprised. The exec team came to us and said, we're so surprised how many people come to us and say, I want to work for you because I can see you give back from every sale online. And it's just, again, comes back to human nature. Like we want to give the best hours of every day to a business that gives a shit, right? That cares about something bigger than profit. And so, that's a little bit harder to quantify, a really engaged team, but it can be done as well, right? Like that X factor, the discretionary output that you can't buy with a salary can be earned when your team know that they're working for a business committed to something much bigger than themselves.
100%. So has that changed the way you do your business development? Like knowing that you can, bring others on the journey, help them understand that profit and purpose is not a binary, proposition. One drives the other. Purpose drives profit and successful outcomes. Has it changed in terms of who you get to understand the full story, knowing that, you can bring the marketing department on board and then they go and try and sell it on to the CFO and the CFO says no. Have you managed to figure out how to bring the decision makers on that journey yet? It's hard in a big business, I know.
So we've built an ROI calculator, which is on our site.
Oh, fantastic.
You can plug in what are your average conversion, what are your average monthly volumes?
Yep.
What's your average value, AOV?
Yeah.
And it spits out conservatively the revenue uplift it could drive.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
When did you do that? Is that recent?
Yeah, recently. Recently it's on the site. And it also shows what the multiple of, as it would be as an ROI. So, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah.
So we go over those figures. We export it to a PDF and we say, present this to the CFO.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's helping.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So how do you see customer behavior evolving? Like since you've launched I=Change, are consumers genuinely rewarding businesses that integrate giving back or purpose into their core offering? What have you seen?
Oh, yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, we do know that between what consumers say they do and what they do when no one's looking, there is a gap.
Yeah,
for sure. And yes, people shop with their wallet. I'm guilty of that myself. We save a few dollars here and there when we can, absolutely. But I think that's less and less what the choice is, because as more and more businesses give and have that commitment to people and planet, then it's less about the price because they've built that in as part of their marketing. So assuming the price remains the same, which with us it does, they just decide to give back. We're seeing then the opportunity is how do you engage and build a passionate community of customers who care about you beyond and stand for you and are loyal to you based on that broader purpose. So I think the corollary to that is, there's a sense of nihilism creeping in, like we're kind of the world's screwed, so why does it matter? And of course, with Trump in the White House and what's happened with DEI, and there's a sense of sort of anti-wokeism, and somehow impact and sustainability has been conflated with that. So it's definitely a challenging time. But I come back to, I think there's some fundamentals to our human nature, which is when I talk, often the first thing I ask people is put up your hands if you care passionately about an issue. And, there's a sea of hands, right? You get the odd sort of cranky person who doesn't care about anything, but, there's less than 1%. We all care. And I say, leave your hand up, put the other one up if you'd love to see the businesses support that issue that you care about. And, sea of hands, 2 hands. So I think it's just a matter of reaching that tipping point where consumers begin to expect to be engaged by what a company cares about. And so, we're constantly kind of building and launching tools so that the brand can feature their impact. Because, traditionally that sort of cause marketing was, and even brands now, like they'll have on the back page of a website saying we support X. No one goes there. No one really knows what it means.
It's an afterthought. It's an afterthought.
And it's not transparent, right? So technology can bring it into full transparency in real time. So we've got these little impact widgets where any page on a site, you can have that live counter showing how much you're raising and how many lives it's impacting, and really bring that to life in a dynamic way to continuously engage and inspire your customers along that purchase journey.
Yeah.
To remind them that you are actually transparently, with commitment, giving back. And so, I think as social animals, as we begin to see more of that and expect more of that, what does business exist for? It's to reflect the desires of its customers.
Yeah.
And there's an enormous gap still between what we care about and what businesses do and get away with.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe, therein lies this enormous opportunity to bridge that gap. And in bridging that gap, it's going to unlock enormous funding for the issues that we care about. At the same time, we need to really start highlighting. We've started this series called the Impact Leaders series, where I just did one yesterday, where we feature our NGO CEOs and those on the front lines to highlight the extraordinary work that they do, the complexity and the expertise, and to stop seeing them again as these cute charities, but as experts in their field that we, again, need to be well resourced to address and respond to the issues we care about. So, by sort of bridging those worlds between business and the NGO sector, I think we can continuously, normalize that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. I think we need to understand with much more sophistication what these organizations do. They do hard work. They're not there for the money.
Yeah.
We need to stop with this ridiculous narrative about the overheads.
Yes.
We need to judge them on their impact, not their overheads. Everyone needs to be paid. Right. And sometimes the more the pay, they get better staff, the more they can report on their programs, they can improve them. If they can market them, that means they're going to make more money for those programs, right?
Yeah, stop tying their hands behind their backs, right?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you explain that and any sensible person gets it very quickly. But if the narrative, it's been going on for far too long, this ridiculous story of, how much of the money gets to the field. Like, what does it even mean? Like, have you been to the field? Most people haven't, right? Do you want me to drop a bag of money on a street? Does that mean all the money's gone?
Yeah.
What impact is that going to have, right? Like working alongside community, alongside local partners who are of that community, right? It is changing hearts and minds is complex work. I was just before COVID in Bangladesh with the Hunger Project, working with incredible older gentleman who was the country director, and they were working to end the marriage of girls. And they did that by traveling around the countryside as locals, talking to male community leaders, helping them understand that, the marriage of their daughters is a cultural practice. It's not a religious one, and that they're all poorer for it.
Yeah.
When you marry your daughter off the age of 12, 13, 14, or sometimes younger, her development, her education, her capacity to be a resource for the economy and the community basically stops, because very quickly she gets pregnant and she's having children, and that's the rest of her life, pretty much. So that's hard work, right? Going from village to village in poor rural Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, and gathering community leaders and slowly changing hearts and minds and proving to them the opportunity to ensure their daughters can finish their education in communities where there often is just enough money for one of their children, which often the money goes to the boy to go to school, right? So there's all these sort of systemic challenges in low resource settings. And again, that's an example of how, a small amount of money can go a long way. But also there's so much power in this storytelling. Right? Businesses being able to tell a bigger story. Like how many times can you talk about your shoes?
Exactly.
And put them on sale, right?
And people want human stories. Like, when they're real, genuine stories, people respond to them.
They do.
And when it's a real, genuine partnership, not just a quick tick box exercise, that's where you build that level of trust, which has been eroded significantly with business.
Yeah, 100% trust, integrity, authenticity. Like we want it. It's funny. Like we want to love the brands that we love, and we want to be loyal to them. But it's kind of businesses. I think that the next leap is actually to give people a reason to love you beyond. I don't mean to have a hard time on shoes, but let's just stay with the theme of shoes for now. There's only so much love you're ever going to engender by creating another style of shoes. But if you can intimately connect the purchase of those shoes to whether it be pulling sediment off the reef or helping ensure literacy for remote Indigenous communities in Australia, or supporting an Australian family where 1/3 now are struggling to pay for groceries, or $5 can provide a wardrobe to a woman who's trying to get back to work, who's struggling from a low resource and challenging or even abusive situation. I mean, what a powerful way to create passion amongst your customers.
Yeah. Yes.
And that needs to be if it is the future of business, we're just not there yet.
Well, we're seeing more and more it's the future of successful businesses. And
That's
I know I Equal Change is a B Corp. My little consultancy is also a B Corp.
Oh,
and
brilliant. Fantastic.
And someone shared the other day, I didn't know this, but apparently they've done some data collecting, and B Corp organizations financially outperform non-B Corps by a certain factor. I can't remember how much, but that again, that profit and purpose, love and money, it's intrinsically connected. Jeremy, looking ahead, what's your big vision for I Equal Change? How do you see your model influencing the way all businesses think about purpose and impact in the future?
Well, I see us as playing a leading role amongst others, and the B Corp movement and others being part of it. We all need to work together, as we often are, to create this. It really is a seismic change in how business does business and what we consider normal. And it needs to be driven by largely consumers, but also visionary leaders. And, we've got a few hundred of them, but it's still just a drop in the ocean. We're going to be engaging consumers as well to unlock citizen philanthropy, again, to kind of make it easy for us as individuals to support those issues we care about.
How will that work?
It'll make it, you could, there's a few little trade secrets I might just hold on to at this point, because we're going to launch it a big way with the media.
Okay.
But what I will say, it'll live on your phone, so kind of an app, and it's going to be a very low entry point for you to just a few dollars a month, right? Where you can set up a subscription.
Yeah.
But we're looking at a kind of a portfolio approach to impact.
Okay.
Given that most people are not familiar with many NGOs. And that will be combined with the businesses that are giving back, of which,
Mhm.
we have many, and a few kind of financial tools to kind of make this your go-to. So yeah, it'll be complementary to the businesses, but the idea is it'll be disruptive and it'll drive more businesses on board, because the more we have our own audience, the more we can serve that audience to our businesses. Let's say
Yeah.
we kind of own the purpose-driven consumer,
Yep.
and if you want access to those eyeballs, you've got to come on board and give back.
Yeah.
So the idea is that it's mutually quite disruptive, and it's less of a kind of a cute thing to do, and rather becomes what must be done
Yeah.
in order to access that audience, remain relevant, and create change. So, our
Brilliant.
goal is to raise millions of dollars. We're working on a docu-series as well, where we take business leaders into the field.
Fantastic.
And give them a really visceral experience of the issue of that community, the issue that they're funding, helping to fund. And I'll kind of host that, and it'll be like a web series
Mhm.
initially, and something that is eminently watchable and powerful and emotional, and also inspires both consumers and businesses. So we aim to be a lot more disruptive, raise a lot more money.
Are you going to be the David Attenborough of the impact world? You've got the TV voice for it, Jeremy. I have to say that you have got the voice.
Well, if I can still be going at 99, which David is,
my
what an
God.
extraordinary,
And what he's done with Oceans, that documentary, is absolutely extraordinary.
unbelievable. And so if I could have a drop of the influence that he's had, it would absolutely be an honor. When I go into the field, and I was in Rajasthan, for example, a few months ago, with an incredible NGO that we partner with called Educate Girls. There's over 4.5 million Indian girls that are not in school, that should be in school, that could be in school, where $100 can keep a girl in school for a year. $100, right? And I just think, why? We need to tell these stories.
Yes.
Like, these are the most extraordinary, brilliant young women. The Indian teams are fabulous, and we need to know about this. We need to stop distracting ourselves with nonsense and be motivated by these incredible impact leaders who are creating change around the world. And for me, they should be our heroes. They should be our celebrities.
God, yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Not the ridiculousness of the Kardashians and people who are famous for being famous, right?
Yeah.
And starting another business, the cosmetics brand and all this nonsense. Like, these are the people like David Attenborough that should be our heroes. These are the ones we need the younger generation to think, that's who I want to be when I grow up, right?
100%.
I want to change the world. I want to work for or run an NGO or a social enterprise, or I want to make a difference and unlock the hero's journey in all of us. Give people a pathway to know that they can be the change.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And bringing those stories to life is the antidote to the disempowerment that people feel.
100%. 100%.
When you
sense of
talk about
overwhelm about the
$100.
state of
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're out of time, so I'm going to ask you, thank you so much for coming on the interview.
my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing. It is truly inspiring, and I'm excited to see your development. I'd love to ask you first to share anything else you would like to share, but then to take us out by sharing, if you could achieve your dream by 2030 with I Equal Change, what would it look like?
2030. So what have we got? 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, we've modeled out our projections, and by 2030, we'll be raising over $30 million a year.
Wow.
And that's actually achievable on still a relatively small base of businesses and consumers. And $30 million a year, especially in the developing world, is going to start to have foundational impact.
Absolutely.
In low resource settings. And you'll note I don't use the word poor. I think that is a condescending and even sort of has a colonial overlay. These are simply low resource settings where brilliant people live and work, and the opportunity to unlock their potential, for us to see that as as one of the best uses of our privilege in the developed world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that we don't enjoy life and we go to the football and we have our $50 eggs on a Saturday. Like, you can do all that, but also have something going. And that's what we aim to build with this app, where you can still make a small impact, right? You can be doing something and just be ticking along so that you know you are being the change. And if enough of us do that, we do reach that tipping point. And then this simply becomes a new way of doing business and doing life.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?